Welcome to Step by Step Making a Baby Dirndl Part 2, where we will be turning the bias tape on the neckline to the right side of the bodice and then carefully top stitching it in place. After that, we'll put the double fold bias tape along the armholes, and I'll show you how to overlap it so that it doesn't add a lot of bulk. I'm sewing double fold bias tape along the neckline on the lining side of the front bodice. The bias tape exceeds the front edge by about 1/2 inch. The extra bias tape needs to be folded tightly under the bodice front. So I sew to the center front of the bodice and then sew backwards 1/2 inch or so, and then I leave the needle down, raise the presser foot, and then with a pin I tuck the extra bias tape tightly under the center front of the bodice and then stitch forward again toward the center of the bodice and then backwards to lock in the stitching. This next part is one of the most amazing things about double fold bias tape. As I roll this up and fold it up, it just coves and contours around the neckline so nicely. Now I'm just holding the dirndl front kind of flat, and I'm just rolling this double fold bias tape around. You see how that just lays down just beautifully? The trickiest part is this very center front here. I just hold it down with my thumb and fold it down and pin it in place, and I will come through and hand stitch that front section, and then I'll come through and top stitch the whole neckline. First, fold in the fabric I sewed on, and then fold it up, wrap it around the raw edge and down over like this, and it's laying down just so smooth. It's just amazing. It can go from having kind of a ratty looking dress to immediately looking so sharp and clean. See all these little ratty edges here? As soon as I fold this double fold bias tape around it, bam, the edge looks beautiful. And really, top stitching this is also something where you just have to go as slow as a snail. If you go fast and you get out of the spot where you're supposed to be sewing and it looks kind of bad, you might have to rip it out, and that is what really slows you down. So doing it right the first time is the name of the game. The transformation from just a couple pieces of fabric to a dirndl just seems like in a snap of the fingers it's done when you use this double fold bias tape. Now I'm going to show you again how this is all sewn on. Remember how we did it? Now I'm going to just kind of pull it up over the top so it has a nice clean edge, and I'm going to take the double fold bias tape, and it has a couple folds in it, so I'm going to use those same little folds to fold that underneath. Okay? And again, a lot of times I just do some hand stitching right there, just a few stitches to make it all lay down just fine. And I usually do the hand stitching before I do the top stitching. Then the top stitching will go all the way to the edge and it looks just so darn slick. Now remember from the pattern, this is where we sewed, where this little stitch line is. The buttons or the center of the dirndl will be 1/2 inch from that raw edge. So if you were to look at this pattern, we are now at this spot. This part, the seam allowance is gone, it's gone inside, and so the 1/2 inch in from that is where the buttons or the snaps are going to go. So they overlap by 1 whole inch. I am just loving it already. I've got the needle and thread all ready to go here. I'm going to start in underneath here so that the knot that I have will be buried. You won't even see it. And this kind of thing is these are the little details I think that make a dress look pretty darn perfect. The main thing is I've got thread that matches the double fold bias tape. This will get it so that it is finished off really nicely. When I get done, I'm going to tie a knot and bury all the loose threads down inside. This is finished off on both sides really nicely. Now, needle, go in through here, which will take the knot down in there. I'm going to do the same on the other side. Before I start this, do you see how this is kind of hanging off a little bit over the end? I'll take care of that by the hand sewing. Get my knot up inside of there. I'm going to wrap this around a little bit tighter than it is currently. On the left, and then I fold the top part down, and then all of it will look great. Do you see this little piece of full bias tape that's sticking out, that would have been stitched down with the sewing machine, and it wouldn't have that clean edge. So I'm going to now use my needle to kind of hide that down in there and wrap the double fold bias tape around it. Okay, all the hand sewing is done, and now I'm going to top stitch this entire double fold bias tape down. I'll remove the pins as I go along. This ending is extremely thick, lots of layers, must be 8 layers of fabric with the double fold bias tape folded over several times. So I'm going to turn this around this way, and I'm going to put the needle in exactly where I want it, a little ways, maybe a half inch from the end. There we go. And I'm going to sew forward. I think I'm just going to turn the hand wheel, and I'm going to go through the end of this very thick stuff. Sometimes it can be pretty fussy. When I get about to the end, and remember this is already sewn down by hand, so I don't have to worry about it coming loose or something. I'm going to rotate this around, and hopefully it will let me go back the other way. I'm going to get past that really thick stuff, and after I get past the really thick stuff, I'll start sewing with the motor. Let's see if that'll work. There we go. Yeah, it's still bogging down. I've got my hand firmly holding on with the left, and I'm going to use it to kind of pull the fabric backwards. There we go. Now I'm going to be sewing very slowly, and what I'm going to do with this is see how this kind of wants to do that. Well, I'm going to use my right hand to keep everything flat. I'm going to undo these pins and lay it down the way the fabric will actually be when the baby wears the dress. Going really slowly so that I'll stay right there on the edge. And when I need to turn, I'm going to lift up and turn a little bit. This is a little bit tricky, but it's worth the time to do this well if you're going to do it at all. And don't give it a lot of gas. And again, like driving a car, go really slowly around the corner. And these are tight little corners with this baby dress. There we go. That laid down flat. Now, well, I'm on a straightaway now, so it shouldn't be too hard to stay right where I want to be. Now when I get up to the next pin, I'll pull it out, and again I'll make sure that everything's laying down flat. This doesn't really take a lot of skill as much as it takes a lot of patience. This is where I'm very happy that I already went through and did all the hand sewing, because I don't have to have a pin to hold it in place. Now we're going to go around the corner and finish it off. When I get here, I'm going to stop, and I'm in that really thick part again, and now I'm going to turn the fabric around to go backwards to lock the stitching in. And there it is. This is what it looks like now, and I need to trim the extra little threads at the end. Now remember with the pattern that this is going to overlap. I guess it's like this, so it'll be an inch of overlap, and the actual center of the dress is a ½ inch in from the edge, so you'll find that mark on both of them, and that gives a really nice clean finish to the front of the dress. Now that the neckline's done, we're going to move on to the 2 armhole openings. I'll find my bias tape and locate the side that is the most narrow, which in this case is the one on top. I'll open it up, and I'm going to put it on the lining side of the bodice, just to the right of the side seam. I'll locate it so that it's right there. The edge of the bias tape is on the edge of the seam opening, and I'll put a pin about every inch right in that very last fold line. Now I'll have to put the pins very, very close together, because the sleeve opening is really very tight and it turns really sharply, so you just really have to put a lot of pins in here to hold this down. Pin all the way around until we get back to where we started. Then I'll show you a cute little trick to overlap the 2 ends of the bias tape without adding a lot of bulk where the ends come together. Remove the pin from the first end of the bias tape and cut diagonally across the whole width of the bias tape like this. Fold that seam allowance up like this and pin it in place. I'm going to pin sort of diagonally to hold it down, like that. I'll take the other end of the bias tape and just kind of pin it in place over the one I folded. So now I'm going to trim it, but I'm going to trim it way back here, like this. So now I have the one layer of double fold bias tape underneath going that way, this other piece overlapping it, and I'm going to remove this top pin that's in the ditch, pin it down like this too. Then I turn the dress around, and you see how that's at an angle? I'm going to cut this top one at an angle, being really careful not to cut anything that's underneath, like that. So now they overlap at an angle, like that. I'm going to start right past where this overlaps, right here. Now I'm going to line up this last fold line right there, and that's where I'm going to start my sewing. So I'm going to put my needle in just past that whole business with lots of things coming together at one spot. So I'll put my needle about right here. I hate to end part 2 with the armhole opening looking like such a pinned up mess, but I'm trying to keep each video around 15 minutes in length. Join me for part 3, where we'll sew the bias tape to the armhole openings and finish the armhole openings in a smooth and clean manner. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel.